When did you graduate?
16.
16. So you've been out getting on 5 years. It'll be 5 years this year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I'm good at math. When you started school, what did you think you wanted to do?
I was a singer in high school, and I was really interested in all that. But then as I was a senior in high school, I sort of discovered theater tech and became interested in like behind the scenes stuff. So I came to Loyola because I could sort of do both things. Like I could sing opera, and then I could also explore something that was sort of like theater tech, behind the scenes production world. And then as I got a chance to explore both those things, I sort of discovered that performance wasn't really for me. And as I got more into music festival production and all that, and that took up more and more of my time, I ended up switching from the music track to the business track and going full time into the production world. So
I remember seeing you working at Jazz Fest definitely while you were still a student.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely remember 1 year getting my Gentilly stage credential from you. that was part of your job. So what was your end to Jazz Fest? When did you start working at the Jazz and Heritage Festival, and how did that progress? Like, tell me that whole story from your entrance to that to like what you've been doing recently for them.
Well, my entrance to Jazz Fest actually came from Buku. I was a volunteer at Buku, and I worked. I remember like the second day I pulled like a 20-hour day. And my boss was impressed with me.
Like, oh, you get this. You have exactly. What it takes to do this thing. Yeah.
I was a volunteer, so she was very impressed, and she worked on Jazz Fest and brought me in. And I started out on the artist catering, which, I mean, it's a 50-year-old show, so they have weird words for things. But really what it is artist hospitality crew, which is ostensibly lugging coolers around Jazz Fest and setting up dressing rooms. Like, so, just kind of sweating it out in the fields there. And through the years, I worked my way up. I did that for a few years. Then I was a team lead for that team. And then I was brought into the office, and I started doing working in the office about 4 months a year seasonally. So from January until after Jazz Fest. And what I do now is I do all of our national contract administration, so that, or at least I did. I don't know, now that I live in Chicago, what's going to happen. But I was doing all of our national contract administration, so 150 or so nationally booked bands that are booked through a booking agency every year versus like the local bands that we send a contract to.
Right.
I would administer all of the agency contracts, facilitate the markup, make sure that everything's in order, track that whole process, and then and then into deposits, get all the deposits paid, and then once that's done, which is usually about 2 months before the show, I could start to sort of step away from that. I would aid my boss in running the talent department, or, in modern terms, artist relations department at Jazz Fest. I was the assistant there. And that's a big undertaking. I'm sure everybody knows Jazz Fest, but it's 14 stages, over 750 bands on the lineup, 100 event day staff just in our department. A lot of data and logistics to manage there.
Cool. So what were you actually doing day of show? Like, I remember seeing you walking around with walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
Like, what were you trying to make sure worked and didn't blow up and whatever?
So I was responsible for advancing a handful of the bands. Like, we all kind of split it up each day. One day I take the headliner on Congo, and the next day somebody else takes it. And so I'd be responsible for advancing 40 to 50 bands into the show. From a hospitality and dressing room standpoint. So at that point, once I was in the office, mostly what I was doing was checking up on them, making sure everything was okay. I mean, like, all of the actual work is because the organization is so big, by the time you get to the show, all the actual work should be being done by the staff, and they do it well. So most of the time it's fine. But when there's problems, that's when we step in and, make sure stuff is happening correctly and all that.
So you've done a bunch of other festival stuff. Did that all grow out of these connections? Like, if someone wants to do this sort of work, what did you do that got you that kind of work?
So I started volunteering, and what I did was I just worked really, really hard around so how I got really into the festival world beyond Jazz Fest was through that same person I met at Buku. Her name's Sayira Anderson. And she, that summer, took me under her wing and said, come with me to all of my shows that I'm doing this summer. She was, doing mostly running artist relations department at that time. And I packed my car and drove up to the East Coast, basically, and went show to show with her for a couple months. Sometimes I got paid, sometimes I didn't. I kind of just like scrapped by for a little bit. And then by the time that was all over, like that summer, I did it twice, but that first summer is where I've met all my people that I still work with on a daily basis. So it's all about showing up and being impressive. Like not just showing up and doing the job, but being impressive. And now that I'm on the other side of it and hire people and stuff, I look out for those kids who are, putting in the extra effort and clearly really want to do it. Like really want to be there and do the thing beyond the kids who are just there for a free ticket, which is fine too. Like if you want to do that, that's fine. That's the arrangement. But we do pick out kids who put in the extra effort and really show that they have the will and the brains to do it well.
Is it pretty obvious? Like I remember going to minor league baseball games with my daughters and being like, okay, so that guy, he's actually a major league player who's down on an injury rehab.
Yeah.
And look at him next to other people. You can tell that's the big league guy. And these other guys are never going to get out of AAA.
Yeah.
Right. Is it the same thing watching people work on these festivals? You see like, oh, she's the one. She's going to do stuff.
Yes, there are definitely people like that. There are also people who grow into it. I've seen it happen both ways. Like it doesn't have to be immediately. It's definitely a weird thing to do for a living and you have to get used to part of it. And there are some people who try to grow into it and never really do. Everybody has sort of their own path there. But yeah, there are definitely people who immediately I'm just like she's got it. Like that's the person.
Yeah. Cool. So you've also done some like sort of tour managing, like things where you're on the road with people instead of at a festival making different acts happen, things where you've been touring with the act. Give us some name drops, like who have you toured with, and then tell me some about that work.
So I have primarily, I toured with Tedeschi Trucks Band a lot as a production assistant. I've toured with Leon Bridges as a production assistant. And I've also done some fill-in dates with Wilco as a production assistant and know them well through their festival and all that stuff. I had just at the very I just got my first big boy tour manager job in January. My first tour with these guys was a New Year's run. And it was a white boy reggae band called Stick Figure. And they were getting ready to do their first ever amphitheater headline tour. Like we had a sold out day at Red Rocks and like it was a big deal. And then of course the pandemic happened. So I did a few shows with them before everything shut down.
So when you're on the road as a production assistant, what's your day look like? Like what are you actually doing?
So at that level, when you're talking like amphitheater headline bands, which is where most of my experience is, generally the tour manager is staying with the band. So the tour manager will be with the band either at a hotel or, just working and advancing in the morning. So primarily what I'll do in the morning is get the world set up. Like I assign dressing rooms for all the bands, including the openers. I hang all the signage that tells people where to go. And I make sure that the venue is functioning. I usually control the runners. We usually have, like at that, it's pretty standard to have 2 runners at that size of show. So I have 2 runners that work for me and we do any number of things like, they go buy batteries or whatever production needs that day, after show food or whatever. I also have a hand in advancing the show. I advance catering and the hospitality side of things, minor logistics. And then, I help with general administrativeness of the tour, whether that's like some light bookkeeping or, whatever, and many needs as arise, as it does happen in those, moments. Also credentials and guest list is a big one too.
Okay, cool. And so there's probably someone else doing the like tech sound side of sort of those same things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, when you get to that size, there's generally a dedicated crew bus, with 12 bunks on it, full of folks that are doing the technical side. And I'm the lone administrator on there. It's sometimes intimidating because some of these folks are technically brilliant. And I'm like, I do the I do the spreadsheets and I order the pizza.
But I'm sure they're all very happy that you're good at making sure the pizza's there.
They love pizza. Everybody loves pizza. Yeah, it's at that level. Like you're talking about folks who can, deconstruct guitar amps, put them back together with a soldering iron and a screwdriver on the road when that needs to happen. It's really cool to work around the technical people I do.
That's cool. So like when you're out with say Derek and Susan, like how many people were traveling on that tour?
Tedeschi Trucks band tour. So I've traditionally done the Wheels of Soul tour with them, which is like a packaged tour. Usually it's the band, which is a 12-piece band. So that's big already. And then there's a crew bus. And then in the summer they split out into 2 band buses. And then there's the crew bus, which has 12 bunks, which is full. And then usually the tour manager is the 13th person on the band who rides the band.
Yeah.
And then you have the support acts, which vary year to year, but usually it's a total of around 50 people in the touring party, including support act crew and drivers and all that.
That's a lot of stuff to keep up with.
Yeah, it's a lot. But you get into a rhythm. It's actually like, I like to say that festivals are doing a different thing in the same place every day, but touring is doing the same thing in a different place every day.
That's a really good point. And having been on both sides of that it is a trip to watch a stage to go like from the Meters to Carlos Santana in 20 minutes.
Right. But when you're on tour and it's your house, like you really do get into a rhythm and you're building the same stuff. And it really gets easier the longer you go with it.
Sure. And all of that build out for the artist creates this sense of comfort because every night when you walk on stage, like your stuff's where it's supposed to be and you like things work and you see the same people in the wings. You're like, okay, I'm safe. I can make my music. This team has created a situation to let me do my thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you were a student, I remember you doing some band management. There was one particular band that I remember you managing.
Asian Feel, shout out, what up?
Yes, I played one gig with them. It was a lot of fun. I still have the T-shirt. Nice. How did those things overlap? Did you think like I want to do artist management and end up in events, or did they kind of coexist and just you got work in one space and not the other? Like what? How did you find that path? Because I know you had sort of explored a couple of things. Yeah,
I mean, I was interested in a lot of stuff and I wanted to try it out. I wasn't necessarily set on being a band manager. When I approached them, I was like, I want to learn to be a tour manager. So let me book tours for you and be your manager. And that way we can go on tour. I can tour manage and you can have a manager and a tour manager. And, but yeah, I was very interested. I don't know. I always treated Loyola like a runway. I was like, all right, at the end of this 4 years, I got to be a plane that's flying around. And so I got to try everything else out. I'm going to fail now when it's not too scary to fail and everybody will forget about it because I was just a kid in college then and kids in college fail. It's what they do. So I'm going to go out and try and I'm going to see what fits and what doesn't. And I loved the guys and we had great times. I'm maybe not a manager per se, but it all worked out well.
So that was actually, you envisioned that as a step to what you are doing now. That was intentional on your part.
Mm-hmm. And it's good to know, because when it's interesting to learn from the production assistant side, and then as I was trying to step into the tour management side, how much the management in tour management really does come into play sometimes. Like you have to know who the record execs are, and you have to be able to talk to the press, and you're the one day to day who's there as the face of the band on a business to business side.
Right.
That's a super important step. You have to be able to represent the band well as the band goes through sort of its daily thing. Because sure, the management flies out for the New York City gig, but they're not in Missoula, Montana. That's on you. And it's interesting how that all sort of does play together, and having that sort of, small management experience helps you see through the eyes of the big time artist management when you're working on that side and how you can best help them do their job.
What's the weirdest thing that has happened to you as a production assistant?
Oh boy.
That you can talk about on the internet in front of people.
Oh man. I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff. It's here's a good one. So when I was out with Leon Bridges, we had been doing the band had been doing some private gigs in Los Angeles, right? And I didn't need to be there, so I wasn't there. We had just done an 8-week US tour. We had 2 weeks off, and then we were going to Europe for a month. So I was home for 2 weeks, and then they had done these privates. And then we had one sort of large-scale private in Bentonville, Arkansas that was for Walmart. That was sort of a whole
because that's the only thing in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Yeah, that's why you go there. Right. And they have a direct flight from LA to Bentonville now because of Walmart.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? And that plays into the story. So I was flying from New Orleans to Bentonville to meet the band and, get together. And then we were all going to go to Europe after this gig. The band had flown through the VIP terminal or whatever at LAX, which was kind of new at the time. And the VIP terminal had left every single piece of luggage and gear on the ground in LA. So
wow.
Every 48 pieces. So we're talking guitar, the stuff that's irreplaceable, the stuff that you bring with you. Guitars, drum, everything is super important. Anyway. So I get a call from my production manager while I'm in my layover in Dallas. And he's like, all right, I just got the phone with the airline. All of our gear is going to be on your plane. And I need you to get it and get to the venue as fast as possible because we're waiting to load in for this gear. We can't even load in because we don't have it. And we have to sound check tonight before the gig tomorrow. So he sent 3 vans got drivers with vans, and we were just I get paged on the intercom when we land. They're like, Adam Gerber, please see us at the front. And this very overwhelmed local airline person was like, you have 48 bags in this plane. And I was like, oh, I know, don't worry. She was like, they told me you might not know. So we're pulling them all off the conveyor belt, and I count 46, and I'm like, oh my God. So now I start going back to the manifest, trying to figure out what we're missing, and I turn around, and the last 2 are still making the circle on the conveyor belt. And
wow, that's so great.
The best part was that they bumped my luggage.
Oh, you didn't have?
I didn't get my luggage because they didn't have room for it on the plane.
That's hilarious. Oh wow, that's fabulous. But the show happened.
The show happened, and I got my luggage 6 hours before we flew to Munich. So
so you didn't have to wash the same pair of underwear over and over for the whole European tour. Yeah, that's a great story. Sometimes the weirdest thing that happened gets no answer, and sometimes it gets a great story. I remember from your college days, you've always been a good storyteller, though. Going back to your Intro to Music Tech podcast assignment.
Oh yeah. I'm glad that was resonated with you.
So a lot of, we're all in the middle of this pandemic. I know a lot of our students are especially the ones about to graduate, are super panicky around holy crap, what am I going to do? Yeah. You found yourself in March getting ready for a jazz fest and then probably being unemployed because there wasn't going to be a jazz fest.
Yeah.
I understand you've kept yourself busy. Tell us some of that story. What happened after the world shut down for you?
Sure. So, I don't know. I am a person that works through my feelings. And so when everything was going on and, it just, first of all, I'll never forget, as long as I live, sitting in the Jazz Fest office after South by and Ultra had both gone down and being like, why am I working on this? Yeah. I'm reading this contract. It's why am I doing this?
There was a point where we're all like, we know this is not going to happen. Why have they not said it yet?
Yeah. That it was anyway. But the first week that I work from home and then laid off, which I don't blame anybody for. I'm a seasonal employee. There was no show. I totally get it. I started volunteering at Second Harvest Food Bank just to help. I felt like I needed to do something. So I basically made that my job. I was out there 5 days a week. I got to know everybody. Like, they knew, and I was volunteering. And then through those connections, I ended up getting hired by World Central Kitchen, which is a nonprofit run by the chef Jose Andres that some people have probably heard of. Some people haven't. And they were doing a relief effort in New Orleans, basically where they were buying meals from local restaurants for $8 to $10 a plate and giving them away. They were spending, we did well over 1 million meals in just New Orleans by the time it was all over.
Wow.
And I got hired to operate two 26-foot refrigerator trucks that they were using for their field meal distributions. So like they would send these meals to these parking lot distributions and it's in the trucks so that the meals would stay safe and we could package in the trucks, whatever. Driving trucks that big, which by the way, they were like the kind of trucks that are literally 1 pound under the CDL limit. Like we're talking big, is a skill that I learned from music, just, festival production. Like you got to be able to hop behind the wheel of something that big sometimes. And so I did that with them for a while and, parking lot distributions in June, July, and August in New Orleans, super fun times. Like, just it's,
at least it was a little cooler in the truck, right?
A little, yeah. But when you have to you get I go out to Second Harvest a lot and pick up groceries from them to distribute. So like pushing around 1,000-pound pallets of milk with a manual pallet jack and all sorts of fun stuff. It's great. And then, so we did that for a while. And then I forget exactly when, time is all a blur, but then Hurricane Laura happened in Lake Charles. And with about 8 hours notice, I was sent down there with one of the trucks to aid in their relief effort down there.
Adam, hold on just a second. Your video froze on this end. Like turn your camera off and back on.
You froze for me too.
Oh, interesting. So let's both stop.
Can I stop my video? You start it again.
Okay, we're good. I'll edit that part out.
Okay. So I'll back up just a little bit.
Start at the Hurricane Laura part.
Okay. So then I forget exactly when because time is so messy right now, but Hurricane Laura hit. And right after that, the morning after the storm, I was dispatched down to Lake Charles with one of the trucks to aid in the relief efforts down there. And I was down there for just a little bit under a month. And then on my first day off after about a month, they were like, sorry, no day off for you. Hurricane Sally is coming to probably, at that time, they thought New Orleans. So we need you to pack your truck up because we were sort of winding down in Lake Charles then. And I drove to New Orleans and then to Mobile, Alabama, where I was for about a week after Hurricane Sally.
Wow. So did your festival production skills pay off in food distribution world? Is it essentially the same thing?
It's very similar. It's not exactly the same, but yeah, it's very, very similar. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of the same thought processes and whatnot. I actually met another tour manager in Lake Charles who works for them, who had been working for them up in Detroit and was sent down there. It's production. The difference, especially in disaster response, is that you don't get to plan a disaster response. Like you can try, you can say that after the hurricane passes, we'll use this parking lot to do this, but then there's a tree down in the parking lot. So the most you can really do is stage resources. And then on day 0, you start to plan then. So it's very different compared to a festival that gets planned for a year, every little detail. So that took some getting used to, but otherwise it's very similar thought processes.
What do you think are the traits that make people successful at those things? Like, what are the things that you can do that help you do well in those worlds in terms of just like running the logistics of kind of whatever? What are the personal characteristics of the people you like to work with?
You have to be easygoing. You just have to be, because and I know there's this reputation of old school tour managers who walk in screaming, and I've worked around some of those older folks, and it doesn't work anymore. Things will go wrong and changes will happen, and you have to be able to and willing to work calmly and collaboratively. Both of those things are super important. If you get overwhelmed and you shut down and you stop working with your team, it's all over. Like, and the team will sense that, and you won't get the call again. In my personal experience, it's all about leading with kindness and calmness. Like a big part of why people kept me around when I was young and didn't know what I was doing was that I could calm a room down when everybody was stressed out. Right. Crack a joke at the right moment and all that. And that is so valuable and important when you don't have the ability to calm yourself down. And I mean, anyway.
Yeah. And there's a thing where, like, okay, something broke, something blew up, all the gear got left in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Being upset is one thing, but after you're upset, we still have to figure out how to do the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like,
and yeah, like you're just at that point when the gear's on the tarmac in LA, you're just wasting time by being mad. Like, and and you're wasting time and you're wasting emotional energy that you don't have to expend on random useless stuff like that. And it's easier said than done, right? Like there's going to be moments of stress and panic, but I think the most important thing you can do is be somebody that people want to work around. Be somebody who follows through on your word, get your job done as well as you can, and be somebody that people want to see at the end of the day also when work is over. Yeah.
Yeah, I often think like, okay, if stuff gets weird, who do I want to have to deal with?
Yeah.
Right? They're okay. They're funny at least. So at least we'll have good stories about, this amp blowing up or whatever happened.
Right, and that only takes you so far. Like, still do the job well.
Yeah, right. Right.
But it's definitely what has guided me well is trying to be as kind as I can and work calmly and collaboratively.
What's something you wish you would have been? There's two ways to phrase this question. I was going to say something you wish you would have been taught in school that you weren't, but it's possible that it was something you were taught in school but just didn't pay attention to then.
I will answer this sort of on an angle. I wish that I had an interesting path in that realistically, I probably could have stopped going. Like, I was pretty set up in my career by junior-ish year. And I was working semi-professionally by the time I graduated. And I was like so focused on, all right, I just want to get to work. I wish that I had used that time to add a slash to my position. Like, I wish so much that I was a production assistant / front of house engineer, or like / guitar tech or / lighting designer or something technical, because that's how you get on the smaller tours. Is by being able to handle multiple things. But I'm not. And I wish that I had been able to, step back from what I was doing as far as work, which I don't know if even in hindsight, if I would have had time to handle that.
Sure.
But I wish that I had added a slash.
That's a great way to put it. Add a slash. When I was out years ago with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, there was this second tenor saxophone player on the band who had his CDL. And so he would occasionally spell the bus driver. And he wasn't really a great saxophone player, but I think he stayed on the gig a lot longer because there were nights where we've got a drive that's 3 hours longer than Doug can legally do. Yeah. So don't drink tonight because you're going to be driving later, but it kept, this guy was working. Like it was the slash definitely paid off for him.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So what's your advice to all of our young people who are looking at this still pandemic stricken world, trying to figure out what they're going to do?
In the context of the pandemic, my advice, and I know this is going to be hard for somebody who's like 20 and really, really wants to go, but is to be patient. Like, nobody's going to blame you for having a gap on your resume. Everybody does. I do. Like, this is a lost year. Everybody understands. As you're entering into this world, nobody's going to think twice about it. And then once you're done being patient, as things start to reopen, really have your ear to the ground for opportunities and get the first one that sounds good. Because a lot of shuffling is going on. Like, I have friends that aren't working in music anymore, or, people that have finally gotten to spend time with their kids for the first time in their life and they like it and they don't want to go on the road anymore. And, I feel like there's going to be some pretty major shuffling that goes on as things start to reopen, and that shuffling equals opportunities for you. Like, keep your ear to the ground, jump on things. It doesn't matter if it's not the perfect opportunity for you. You're a college kid. Again, you can fail at this and it will be completely forgotten by the time you graduate. So it's okay to jump into something that maybe seems a little bit out of your comfort zone, or something that's a little bit next to what you're thinking about, what you want to do. But just be ready to jump in, get to work, and try to prove yourself after this all is over.